What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we know that Baldur's Gate 3 was having some issues with the Xbox Series S, specifically for split screen. Well, now it looks like Larian has figured it out alongside of Microsoft, and it certainly brings up a whole lot of questions around the future of the Xbox Series S. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about another, we'll say, strategic acquisition for Sony, and there is also a big update to take a look at when it comes to Nintendo Switch Online and that expansion pack tier. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're going to start today with Phil Spencer and Activision Blizzard. We know, or at least we assume at this point, that that deal is going to go through, since at this point it's just the CMA standing in their way, and it seems like they're doing a lot to try to get them to reverse course and approve the deal, and we're looking towards October 18th or so for that decision to come through. But of course, people are wondering if when that happens, will just a bunch of Activision Blizzard games magically appear in Game Pass the next day? Well, this was in an interview with IGN and Phil Spencer. We can see this posted up, where he says, on ABK, I want to make sure people know there is actual work to move games into Game Pass. So for people who think the deal is going to close, then everything's available in Game Pass, that's not true. It has been true for other acquisitions we've done. There's work to do, just mechanical work for us to go do. So it will take us a time, definitely time, to make those games available. This has nothing to do with making games available native on Game Pass. The Ubisoft relationship is for streaming. So in terms of Game Pass and these games going into the service, yeah, there's a bit more work than flipping a switch, as he's mentioning here, and technically Microsoft can't necessarily tell Activision Blizzard to get to work on that now because they don't actually own them at this time. So they basically have to wait up until the everything's signed, approved, we're good to go, money's been moved around and stuff, and then they can start getting these games moved over into Game Pass. I feel like they're going to try to accelerate that quickly, though, because it would be good for them to have at least a number of Activision Blizzard games ready to go for marketing during the holiday season. But yeah, I wouldn't expect any of these games to go in the next day after the deal's been announced that it's closed. Also, there was a lot of discussion around that Red Dead Redemption port that went to PlayStation 4 and Switch and playable backwards compatible on the PS5. But obviously one part of it was the 30 FPS cap. Well, turns out the game actually runs above that fairly well on the Switch. MVG did a video showcasing this after overclocking a modified Switch system. He was able to reach and actually hold 60 frames per second pretty well. Now, I will point out, he did overclock the system pretty well, but even in portable mode, he was getting 60 FPS consistently across the board and didn't run into any weird issues with crashing or nothing like that. I will say, though, most of the developers and publishers don't necessarily have access to the kind of the profiles that MVG was running with these overclocks, so I guess take that way you will. But yeah, it shows that the Switch is indeed capable of running Red Dead above 30 FPS, and in fact, that probably means that, yeah, the PS5 also capable. Probably the PS4 as well. Probably the Xbox Series X. So it's just capped, I guess, for parity's sake. Hard to say. Oh, and speaking of frame rate, we got some more information on Star Ocean Second Story R, which is the remake of the original PlayStation Classic. Really looking forward to it, the art style and everything going on there. But it appears that on the Switch, at least, it will be running at 30 frames per second. This was new information coming out of Gamescom, and we even had some new footage off-screen of the game being played on the Switch, which it does look pretty good, right? But the information that was shared is confirmation that the game will run at 60 FPS on PC and PlayStation 5 with 30 FPS on the Switch. No word on resolution numbers or anything there. I mean, the game itself should be fine at 30 frames, but to be honest, I think I'm looking at that PS5 version at this time to pick up to play at that nice clean 60 frames per second. But again, we'll get, I'm sure, more technical details as we get closer to launch, and if not, well, I'm sure Digital Foundry will take a look at it themselves. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Baldur's Gate 3, as it will indeed be heading to Xbox this year. Remember, originally Larian had mentioned, well, 2024, unfortunately, because we have to try to work stuff out when it comes to split screen on the Xbox Series S. A bit of a glimpse behind the curtain when it comes to some of the struggles with what the developers are having with these different systems. It's not something we typically hear about, especially when it comes down to one model SKU specifically with the Series S, but here we are. However, it appears they have indeed figured it out. But first, I want to take a look at something that Phil Spencer mentioned to Eurogamer when it comes to the Xbox Series S and potentially a curated release of games going forward. We can see this posted up and transcribed over on VGC, saying, I don't see a world where we drop S, or the Xbox Series S. In terms of parity, I don't think you've heard from us or Larian that this was about parity. I think that's more that the community is talking about it. There are features that ship on X today that do not ship on S from our own games, like ray tracing that works on X. It's not on S in certain games. So for an S customer, they spent roughly half what the X customer bought. They understand that it's not going to run the same way. I want to make sure games are available on both. That's our job as a platform holder, and we're committed to that with our partners. So Phil Spencer wants to make sure games released on the Series X and the Series S. We don't have Series X only release, which brought up the issue with, of course, Baldur's Gate 3. Well, we can see this posted up over on Twitter. This from the CEO at Larian Studios saying, super happy to confirm that after meeting Phil Spencer yesterday, we found a solution that allows us to bring Baldur's Gate 3 to Xbox players this year. Still, something we've been working towards for quite some time. All improvements will be there with split-screen co-op on Series X. Series S will not feature split-screen co-op, but will also include cross-save progression between Steam and Xbox Series. So really long and short of it is the Xbox Series S just won't have split-screen co-op, right? And I see it online. There's a lot of people who say, well, I don't use it anyway, but I mean, I'm sure there are some people that do. However, in this case, this is probably the best scenario for them to get the game out this year. I guess they could revisit it down the road and patch it in, but in their mind, it's the Series S, as Phil Spencer mentioned, and you're paying, like half the price of the Series X, so you understand that you're going to give some stuff up. But really, this whole time it's been, okay, you're giving up graphical features, not like gameplay or just game features like split screen or co-op. And that's sort of been the talk around parity in general, is more about the content of the game, not necessarily the difference between 1080p or 4K or even 30, 60, or 120 frames. And it does bring into question the future of the Xbox Series S when it comes to a situation like this. Will this be something that if another developer is struggling with the Series S for, it could be split screen, are they able to drop it for the Series S? It seems like they're not able to drop the entire game, but can they pare back more than just the visuals in the game? Can they remove certain aspects of the content of that game to make it work on the Series S? And is this something that is going to be widely available or just in special circumstances with large enough games? If GTA 6, for example, is struggling with some aspect, I assume Microsoft will kind of bend the rules a bit there, but maybe not for certain smaller indie developers. So again, a lot of questions going forward with the Series S, and we'll see how Microsoft is able to navigate this entire situation, because I feel like the Series S is going to be here to stay for quite some time, considering there's a reason to believe that the majority of players in the Xbox ecosystem now for the Series has a Series S. And when I say majority, I mean, it's probably 55% versus 45% Series S to X, but you can't necessarily cut out the largest part of that generation then, just because games aren't necessarily functioning with something like split screen. So interesting stuff going forward here for Microsoft as they attempt to, again, navigate the situation with the Series S and the Series X. Next up, let's talk about another acquisition that Sony's made. And they haven't necessarily made the acquisition on the level of Activision Blizzard. I think the largest one they've made so far was Bungie for about $3 billion. And they've made some smaller acquisitions. One that you could see as more strategic, think of Nix's, who, of course, is working to port PlayStation games over to PC. In this case, though, it looks like the acquisition would play more into the audio technology side of things for Sony. We can see this posted up over on Business Wire. It says Sony Interactive Entertainment to acquire Audeze, a leader in audio technology and developer of award-winning headphones for gaming. Now, I'm not necessarily familiar with Audeze. I'm not a big audiophile person who's going to spend thousands of dollars on headphones, but there's clearly a market for it because they have actually done pretty well for themselves, especially from the technology side of things. This quote from the senior vice president platform experience at Sony Entertainment, saying Audeze is a premier brand for headphones, and this acquisition highlights Sony's Interactive's focus on innovation and providing the best audio experience to PlayStation players. We're excited to bring Audeze's expertise into the PlayStation ecosystem, building on the great strides we've made with PlayStation 5 Tempest 3D audio tech and the Pulse 3D wireless headset. So I do look at this as a strategic acquisition on Sony's side for the technology and the know-how between, yes, the higher end audio sector, but also, again, a lot of the know-how and technology that goes into that sector. So I don't necessarily know if this is something that is immediately going to bear fruit for the PlayStation ecosystem, but we do see Sony have quite a heavy focus on audio right now. We see the accessories that have been coming out. I mean, they have the little earbuds that are, premium priced, I would say, for earbuds looking at them. And then also the nice headphones and everything else they've been doing there with 3D audio. So this, to me, just continues to play into that and will have them evolve over time, I assume throughout this generation, and then into the PlayStation 6 generation. Also, this can probably provide help to Sony's other sectors, since they do a lot when it comes to accessories, of course, outside of PlayStation. But yeah, again, not a big explosive acquisition, but one that I think will help them behind the scenes when it comes to the technology side. Next up, let's talk about Nintendo Switch Online and a pretty cool update for the Nintendo 64 expansion pack tier, as there is a new game heading to that service in about a week or so. And Nintendo tried to slip one past Newswave, as they technically announced this last night at 9 p.m., but I was ready for them. Let's take a look here over on Twitter, where they say, want to get some serious air, race across 20 tracks and set the daredevil inside you free in Excitebike 64, coming to Nintendo Switch for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack members on August 30th. So next week we will have Excitebike 64 dropping in, and I enjoyed Excitebike 64. One of my friends had this game, and I go over to his house, and there was one part of the game that I vividly remember, which was like a course where you would just do tricks over and over again, and that's kind of all I wanted to do. I know you can race around tracks and stuff, but just pulling off all like the big jumps with different tricks was enough for me, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I will definitely be checking out Excitebike 64 for that nostalgia trip. But I do like the trailers they keep showing off where they make new ones for these different games. It's a fun thing. And I'm looking at this currently. There's 2 games left for the expansion pack tier as have been announced through 2023. So I'm kind of viewing this maybe as like their September announcement as well, since it's right at the end of August, and maybe the next announcement is October, then November, and they're kind of done for the rest of the year. Or maybe they could announce some more games heading to the service at what everyone assumes to be a Nintendo Direct in the first half of September. Now, the 2 games that are still coming to the service, that would be Mario Party 3 and 1080 Snowboarding. So still some pretty good ones to look forward to. More so, I would say Mario Party 3, although I'm sure there are people who really enjoyed 1080 Snowboarding like I did as Excitebike, with that kind of nostalgic flair to it. But let me know if you're checking out Excitebike. Also keep in mind, a lot of times when new games get added in, there's also behind the scenes updates for different things. So we'll see if Nintendo makes any big changes or upgrades aside from Excitebike 64, and I guess we'll see which one's up next, hoping for Mario Party 3, and then if they have any updates going forward, because they're through all of their Game Boy games, about to be done their Nintendo 64 titles, and then it's pretty much wide open for, I guess, a new roadmap that might even lead us up to the next system's release. We'll see. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts, giving us an update week to week on how games are selling in Japan. And I wanted to look at this one specifically because, well, Pikmin 4 just continues to roll along, and we can actually see that here with the games. Looking at the top 10, Pikmin 4, the top 54,904. This is the 5th week in a row that it's topped the sales charts in Japan, coming up on 750,000 sold physically just there alone. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, course, at number 2. Did you know the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe actually topped the UK sales charts, I think, last week? It's ridiculous. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom then at 3, Minecraft at 4, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet at 5, Splatoon 3 at 6, then Nintendo Switch Sports, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Mario Party Superstars, then Animal Crossing New Horizons, rounding out the top 10. Moving over to the hardware, the Switch was at the top, 77,780 systems. The PlayStation 5, 37,411. The Xbox Series, 1,327, 611 PS4s, and then 97 3DS is actually up quite a bit from the previous week. I also want to point something out as we just discussed the Xbox Series X and S split. While this is a small sample size, it's still one that's transparent and right in front of us, where we can see the Xbox Series X having sold 212,000 systems in Japan lifetime, but then the Series S 269,000. So again, you can see it kind of slanting towards the Xbox Series S side of things with the overall install size. And overall, this is just impressive stuff for Pikmin 4. Again, 5 weeks in a row, basically since launch, topping the sales charts. And we'll find out more information from Nintendo when it comes to the global sales numbers at their next fiscal report, which I believe is going to end up in the first week of November when they turn in all of those numbers. And otherwise, I think next week we'll see Armored Core at the top and most likely knocking off Pikmin after a 5-week run. But yeah, business as usual. Otherwise, the entire top 10 was all Nintendo Switch titles, and the Switch continues to top Japan's hardware sales. So who really needs the next system anyway? They can run this thing probably for another 5 years easy there. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if you own an Xbox Series, which one do you have? All right, so 65% have the Series X, 24% on the Series S, and 11% on both. And this makes a lot of sense that the audience here would have more Series X systems out there than S because, well, we're really into games. Obviously, we're very plugged in, and we understand the limitations of the Series S when it comes to its technical abilities, as well as the fact that it doesn't take physical media, which I still think for many of us is important to be able to buy a disc and pop it in to the system, of course. But yeah, I'm telling you, the Series S, a bit more prominent out there in the overall install size for Xbox. So it's gonna be pretty difficult for Microsoft to say, you know what, we're not gonna require releases on, I mean, what's the majority of the systems that are out there right now for us. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Jimmy, who says, I think if the Portal was more like the Wii U, it could have been neat. By that, I mean a direct connection to the console, not going through your router. I would have potentially bought one if that was the case. Yeah, there was a lot of confusion on Twitter over the last 2 days or so since the Portal was revealed and really discussed with pricing and all this. People were making comparisons to the Wii U that just didn't make any sense. The Wii U, at its core, was trying to bring that dual screen setup that Nintendo did so well with the DS to the living room, but it just didn't translate well necessarily when it came to the marketing side of things. The Wii U tablet was like a second screen. It wasn't the main screen necessarily. You could use it as like the off screen and just play there, but its intended use and big innovation was the 2-screen setup in the living room. But you're right in that I wouldn't have minded them coming up with some sort of connection to the PS5, proprietary or not, some kind of direct connection that would give us the best possible picture, latency, the whole thing, rather than still rely on everyone's router, that it's all set up correctly, because again, like 90% of routers out there are not optimally set up. So it's gonna be a roll of the dice depending on how this works for most people, even if they're like 10 feet from their PlayStation 5. So we'll see. Like I said, I will be picking one of these up, but we still need the release date, actually. So here's hoping it's coming up sooner rather than later so we can check it out. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the situation with the Xbox Series S and Baldur's Gate 3, the parity clause being bent just a bit with no split-screen co-op? Do you think we're going to see more of that going forward? Then also, what about the big update for Nintendo Switch Online and that expansion pack tier? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.